So, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. What is it going to be? Is it going to be Dusk of the Dead? No. It's Land of the Dead. Romero just dropped the time of days and changed it into random words. Which is fine because I feel like if he just continued with times of the day, like noon of the dead, it would have got a little tedious. But Land of the Dead. This was Romero's first zombie movie in a while. This came out in 2005. Last we saw Romero's zombie movie was 1985. Obviously, if you've been watching and keeping up with the videos in this series, I love Romero as a director. Not just his zombie stuff even, which has been the focus of this series, because after all, this is a zombie-thon. But I also like his movies, like Martin, I think is a very good movie. I'd like Creepshow, which he was heavily involved with. I think that's a really interesting movie. Great Stephen King performance in that movie. This movie is not really reflective of Romero's capabilities. I just want to go off on saying, like, people, like, criticize a director when they, quote-unquote, lose their touch. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to make a movie. How difficult it is to make one good movie, let alone make a career of great movies. And Romero did definitely have a career of great movies. The fact that he might have lost his touch in his later career, that's not discarding the fact that he was a highly influential director. Same thing with like a George Lucas. People like tend to hate on him for the Star Wars prequels. I think he's an amazing director just because he did the 3 Star Wars movies. Well, he was heavily involved with the 3 Star Wars movies, and even movies like THX 1138. He's got a good body of work. So you can compare Romero's career to George Lucas's career. I think they both have good careers. I just wanted to start the review saying that disclaimer, because we're about to get into the later Romero zombie movies, and a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Romero, he sucks, he lost his touch. He doesn't suck. That's all I'm saying. The movies might suck, and maybe you might not like them, but don't disregard the rest of this guy's career. He's an amazing filmmaker. So you guys are probably thinking that I don't like Land of the Dead at this point, and I actually do like Land of the Dead. It's not nearly as good as the 3 other Romero zombie movies that we've seen so far, but it's definitely an interesting movie. Last we saw these zombies was in Day of the Dead. If you guys remember that, civilization was completely destroyed, and these zombies were starting to get a little smarter. You remember the character Frankenstein? He was doing some experiments with these zombies. Now in this movie, the zombies are really starting to pick up and become smarter. The movie opens up, and you see zombies, and they're trying to do normal daily tasks. One of them is playing the tuba. He's not really playing the tuba, he's just blowing into a tuba. It kind of sounds like shit, but he's a zombie. Why am I so hard on him? And the movie follows John Leguizamo's character. In this movie, there's a tower, and in the tower is all the elite people, the people with money who are able to hide from the zombie apocalypse. Well, John Leguizamo is a little bit of a bottom feeder, and he wants to get into that tower. The movie basically is an allegory for classism and wealth divide. Also, this is like a rebuilt society. Like I said before, Day of the Dead, society was a kaput. There was no society. Now they're starting to like try to rebuild everything. There's this great moment in the movie where you go into like a sleazy bar, and it's like a zombie-themed sleaze bar, and people are taking pictures with zombies, and there's cage matches with zombies. So it's like humans are starting to adapt to this new normality. And I thought that was really interesting to watch. It's always interesting to see how Romero changes the setting of this zombie movie and changes its period of time in the timeline of this pandemic. I thought all that was really interesting. Romero's also kind of poking fun at people who are ripping off his genre. So this was Romero's return to zombie movies, but before that there was that big zombie boom. You had things like 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, Shaun of the Dead, and Land of the Dead came out after those movies, I believe. And he's starting to like poke fun at some of the cliches that have developed from his original baby. So right at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene similar to Shaun of the Dead where they're like, oh, just kill him. I can't. It's my mother. I can't. He's my friend. Whatever. He does like a bait and switch on that. They like start building up to that kind of scene, but the character just shoots himself. Which is probably what I would do, because I hate being a burden. So yeah, that was a fun scene, and there's a lot of those kind of things, just Romero making fun of cliches. Also, I liked the gore in this movie, not all of it, and it's definitely not on the same level as Day of the Dead. I wouldn't even say it's on the same level as the original Dawn of the Dead, but there are some great moments in this movie. There are some that are a bit too cartoonish in my opinion, and we'll get to those later. But overall, I thought the gore was very fun in this movie, and there's some good moments overall.
Jesus Christ. Whoa, no, not in here. Think about where we are. Take a breath. Choose your shots.
I'm going to get into the negatives of the movie. Relating to the gore, there's some of the gore that just doesn't work. It feels like Bugs Bunny. I talked about in Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead how the gore was so reflective of the theme of the movie and what Romero was trying to say. Here it just feels a bit too slapsticky. There's a scene where we believe one of the zombies is headless, but it turns out that his head is dangling behind his back, and it's dangling on a little string. And then he whiplash and bites someone. It just felt cartoony, and they used a lot of CG, and it just didn't work. Also, while on the topic of CG, I don't believe CG belongs in horror movies, ever. Horror movies are highly reliable on how tangible it feels. And when you throw in CG, it just doesn't work. You look at a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street, and you're like, oh, what would I do in a scenario like that? And you're like imagining yourself in this scenario. When you watch a fantasy movie like Lord of the Rings or Avengers or something like that, that's not as much a thing. So it's not as much a requirement for the universe to feel realistic. Like the universe of Avengers feels a little more cartoony, but it's appropriate. Stop putting CG in your horror movies, and stop using CG blood squibs. I think those are a little cheap too. And I get it, it's dangerous for actors to use real blood squibs because they require electricity and the actor can get shocked and stuff like that. I don't know, I think because of fluid dynamics and stuff like that, I just don't think that CG blood is replacing real blood in film anytime soon. Yeah, so those were some criticisms I had, and it was a shame because I love Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead so much just because of their makeup effects. Tom Savini is a genius, and he built his name based off of those movies. So it was really a shame to see Romero resort to CG blood and CG gore effects. Overall, just I wasn't that invested in the characters. I think it was more of a script issue than a performance issue. I have a bit of a problem with Asia Argento's performance in the movie, but I've seen John Leguizamo in other movies, and I think John Leguizamo is actually an underrated actor. He's basically Michael Pena before Michael Pena was a thing. Deep thoughts. But he can do comedy, he can be badass. He was in those John Wick movies, and he played a mechanic, and he was really fun in those movies. He was Luigi in Super Mario Brothers. He was great in that movie. But jokes aside, I think he's a really talented guy. And I don't think he was given much to do in this movie. Everyone kind of just feels a little one-dimensional. They're not given that much to do. Especially the bad guy, played by Dennis Hopper. He's really given nothing to do. He's like a one-dimensional bad guy in his tower, just like some rich prick. I would have liked to see a little more development in the characters, and that would have helped make that theme of classism and wealth divide a little more interesting to watch. It felt a little bit one-dimensional, the whole theme, which is another thing that it does less good than the previous movies. There's so much you can pick apart in Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead when it relates to its themes. You can't do it as much in this movie. It's a little more hammy, unfortunately, because that's what he does with these zombie movies. He does commentary on society. It just didn't work in this movie, really. Halfway through the movie, I found myself missing the music of Dawn of the Dead, especially just like that synth score. The music in this wasn't really not all that memorable. It was like those, like, you know, in horror movies when they have the violins just like doing a pentatonic scale, just like, and then something bad's about to happen, and then jump scare. Yeah, I just missed that synthy, like, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. It had a bit more personality to it. This just felt a little cliche. Yeah, I'm a little mixed on this movie. It's not the worst movie I've seen in Zombie-thon. I would even go as far as to say this is a good movie and an overall positive experience to me. There's plenty of good moments, and it was fun to see this universe continue. I've never seen Land of the Dead before this marathon. I stopped at Day of the Dead because I didn't want my view of the other films to be tarnished. This wasn't bad enough to tarnish my view of the other films, but I don't think it's an essential viewing, and you can do without this one. Which pains me to say, because I just love George Romero so much. However, I just gotta be true. This movie was a bit hit or miss. Overall, a 6 out of 10. 5 or 6 out of 10.
George A. Romero's Land of the Dead.
Zombies, man. They creep me out.